Right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Friday Night Live. It seems like ages since I've done one of these. I know I did. Had Craig on last week, but I mean, like a long time since it was just me on. I think it has been a long time. I can't remember. I think I missed a few and then had a couple of guests on. But anyway, you've got the dubious pleasure of just having me on tonight. I forgot to put my light on. Let me stick that on. Oh, that's better, isn't it? There we go. So the first one I wanted to cover off, this is something someone actually messaged to me, and he was trying to find out where, because I'd spoken before about how whether genes or personality flaws or trauma, etc., can impact addiction and drinking. And I said it was probably a good idea to cover it off again, because I think we've got to the stage now where people almost think that there can't be addiction without trauma. It started off in the 1930s with AA, obviously, and they came up with their theory, their view of the world, and they saw alcoholism, dependent drinking, call it what you will, as kind of like a personality issue, a spiritual disorder. So alcohol's fine for everybody, but you just have these sort of damaged individuals and they've got these personality disorders or spiritual deficiencies, and that's why they can't drink like normal responsible people. That's pretty much been blown out of the water, and then along comes genetics. And that was a big thing, and all this comes about from just people not understanding addiction, and trying to make the best sense. So I'm not belittling these people or trying to insult them, but it comes about of trying to understand something, and like we humans do, we try to understand something and we get it wrong a few times before we finally get it right. So the next thing to come along with genetics, and particularly in relation to alcohol dependency and problem drinking, what was happening was they were able to sort of identify certain genetic differences that were more common among problem drinkers. Okay, so this was all, oh, wow, look, addiction's all to do with genetics. Let me explain this. No one's actually been able to come up with an addiction gene. Okay, and let's look at alcohol, because obviously it's the thing I talk about and the thing I know the best. When you drink alcohol, it is a sedative, okay? And your brain seeks to counter that by becoming hypersensitive. Your brain works by way of homeostasis, which is a delicate chemical balance. And if something interrupts that balance, it takes steps to redress the balance. So when you consume a sedative, your brain does lots of things, but essentially it becomes hypersensitive to work under the sedating effects of the alcohol. So when the alcohol wears off, you feel anxious and out of sorts. Okay. And over the years, your brain becomes better and better at doing this. And three things happen, or four things really. Firstly, you have to drink more to get the same effect. Secondly, you're able to drink more. Your tolerance goes up because your brain's better able to counteract the alcohol. So you're able to drink more of it. But of course, the downside is that the withdrawal gets worse. So you become more and more likely to become addicted to it. There will be differences between different people, and different nationalities and different ethnic groups. Okay, some ethnic groups are not as able to drink alcohol as other ethnic groups. All that means is their brains are less able at the outset to counter the sedating effects of the alcohol. It's almost like they metabolize it slightly differently. Okay, but it's not absolute. People from any ethnic group can become addicted to alcohol, and indeed they do. You see a lot of Asian cultures where people don't drink so much, they're less able to, but you still get alcoholics, problem drinkers out there. Okay, so if you take a population of, I don't know, 10 million problem drinkers and 10 million people who don't have a problem with alcohol, you may find some minor genetic differences, but it's never the whole story, because there will always be people with those genetic differences who aren't addicted, and people without those genetic differences who do become addicted. Okay, it's as simple as being slightly better able to metabolize alcohol or not. Okay, the last thing that, and it's almost like where we are at the moment, is everyone's pointing the finger at trauma, saying all addiction comes from trauma. It's exactly the same situation. Okay. Before as well, the other thing that people were always touching was mental health. People with mental health are more likely to drink and drink too much, etc., etc. But if you think about mental health and trauma, I mean, these are massive umbrella terms, and they encompass all kinds of different situations. But anyone who's got trauma or a mental health issue, generally speaking, they don't feel right. There's something wrong. Okay. And it can be caused by 1,000 different things, but whatever it is, they do not feel right. Okay. There's lots and lots of ways they can deal with that. They can go to counselling, they can speak to their doctor and go on medication. They can hold themselves up at home, self-harm. I'm not saying any of these things are good or bad or whatever, but there's lots of different ways of dealing with it. One way of dealing with it is to take drugs, in particular alcohol. Okay, it's one of many responses to not feeling right. Okay, you tend to find people drinking a lot is a common reaction because if you don't feel right, a sedative, a chemical depressant will take the edge off things. Okay. So it will make you feel slightly better in the short term. Okay. So if you stop there and think, okay, fine, I accept that. What sedatives out there can I get my hands on? Okay. What sedative is out there that is not on prescription that you can get hold of literally 24 hours a day, that you can get hold of an unlimited unlimited amounts, in fact, limited only by either how much you can spend on it, but actually a lot of the time you can steal it anyway. It's alcohol. So if people do suffer from trauma or do have mental health issues, yes, they are more likely to drink and drink more heavily. But again, it is not absolute because you get people without any trauma, without any mental health issues who have become addicted to alcohol purely because they have drunk and become addicted to it. So again, if you think you've got a population of 1 million people who have problems with alcohol and 1 million who don't, the people who do problem drink are probably you're going to find an overrepresentation of people with trauma in their past, and possibly people with mental health issues. But it's never the whole story. And I think this is the problem. Talking in absolutes is where the problem comes in. I've had numerous people contact me who have had a drinking problem for quite a long time, and they've gone to speak to medical professionals who have said to them, you need to find out what the trauma is in your past, what happened in your childhood. And they've said, I had a really happy childhood. There's nothing in my, nobody's childhood is perfect, but, there's nothing in there that worries me. And they're told, go away. You can't stop drinking until you identify this non-existent trauma. And this is where we've got to with it. The other thing to bear in mind with this whole trauma thing, it's not the same dynamic for every single drug. Okay. If you're talking about injecting heroin, that is a massive step for most people. Okay. So it's Friday night. If I wanted to inject heroin, to be honest, I wouldn't even know where to start to buy it, let alone to go through that, the mental thing of actually getting syringes and injecting it. However, drinking's another thing. Most people drink, and most people drink on a Friday night. It's a very different dynamic. I can see the argument that is, well, you must have some kind of trauma inside of you to even want to start taking these drugs in the first place. I can see I don't necessarily agree with it. I can see the argument with that with heroin because it's such a big step to inject heroin for most people. But it doesn't apply to alcohol. It's not a big step to drink. Most people drink. In fact, it's a big step not to drink. And when you drink regularly, you go through that, what I just talked about, the physiology behind it, where when the alcohol wears off, you feel out of sorts, unpleasant, everything looks a bit scary. And then when you have your evening drinks, you feel more relaxed and comfortable. So your view of the world is it's a big, horrible, scary place. And I only feel really happy and comfortable when I'm drinking. Okay. And that happens whether you've got trauma or not. The simple physiology of it is unavoidable. Okay, anyone can get addicted to alcohol. And in fact, most people, despite what they think, drinkers are, if not physically addicted, then certainly psychologically addicted. Because look at the number of people who struggle to do dry January. They can't even stop for a month. Even, take a step back from that. How many people would you think consider themselves as normal drinkers, but consider that they have more fun on a night out when they're drinking? Or forget that, they don't actually really enjoy going out unless they're drinking. That's something they instinctively knew as a child. Children know how to go and socialize and enjoy themselves. It's only when we start drinking alcohol that we start to forget that. So I hope that's covered that off. Hi, William. Thanks for everything you do. I'd like to get your ideas on the importance of a final drink so that you know in your mind that the line has been drawn between being a drinker and becoming a non-drinker. Several other books on alcohol, Alan Carr's, Jason Vale, suggest this final drink, but I don't think your books do. Do you think it's a good idea to highlight this final drink, or is this overthinking things? The whole point of the final drink came from Alan Carr originally, and that came from his smoking book, and it was a final cigarette. And the reason he did that is because he worked out that certainty is a key part of quitting a drug. Because I've talked about the physiology. The physiology is only part of it. The physical side of it, the chemical withdrawal, is only part of it. Where it really bites is the mental craving, where you really, really, really want something. Now, I've spoken many times about that. People think that cravings are just things that come out of the sky and hit you and there's nothing you can do about them. They're a fully conscious thought process. Okay, they start off with you thinking about having a drink, and then you start fantasizing about it and start thinking how wonderful it would be to have that alcoholic drink. And before you know it, you're obsessing about it. So if you're supposed to be out with friends or sat in front of the TV relaxing or having a nice meal or something like that, you're not enjoying your friends, you're not relaxed, you're not even paying any attention to the meal. It might as well be cardboard that you're eating, because you're taken up in this distressing mental tantrum about whether you should have a drink or not. So then you have the drink and you feel a lot better, mainly because it's removing the craving. But the point there is it all starts by entertaining the possibility of having a drink. And what Alan Carr realized 40 years ago was that if you can instill absolute certainty, you're far less likely to crave. Because instead of sitting in front of the TV, out with your friends, out for your meal, and suddenly thinking, oh, it'd be really nice to have a drink, should I, shouldn't I, and getting into that mental craving, that self-imposed tantrum, you don't do it because you simply don't entertain the thought of having a drink. Dawn always says, take alcohol off the menu. And it's so true, such a simple thing, difficult to do, but if you can do it, it pays absolute dividends because you hardly ever crave. Because instead of sitting there thinking, oh, should I, shouldn't I? You just don't even think about it. I'm not drinking. I'm not drinking. I'm not drinking in front of the TV. I'm not drinking out with friends. I'm not drinking ever. And I don't even consider the possibility of it. So no, I don't think you need a final drink, but I do think you need certainty. But you don't necessarily need that final drink for certainty. I think Alan Carr was very clever, having that final cigarette and really concentrating on it. You're solidifying in your mind that final moment, and it helps to build it up. I do genuinely think the dynamic's slightly different with alcohol, completely. So I actually wouldn't advise it. Plus, don't forget, most people, it's not a natural time to stop immediately after a drink. The natural time to stop is when you wake up the next day feeling absolutely obnoxious. That's when most people want to stop. I definitely wouldn't recommend having a drink then. That would be making a bad situation even worse. So I think Alan Carr had a fantastic idea, good basic psychology behind it. Again, applying it to alcohol, maybe less so. Yeah, I mean, if you're sat here and you're having a few drinks and you're thinking, right, this is it for me, then yes, you could have a final one and really solidify it. But as I say, most people don't do that. Most people wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, enough is enough. So you can still reach that same point of certainty without having to have that final drink. You often mention that fading effect bias that occurs when we highlight the positives of our drinking days. It seems that the reverse happens when we're sober, and we sometimes find ourselves downplaying the positives of sobriety and begin to take them for granted. Is there a term that describes this? You are marvelous, by the way. Thank you. So I do cover this. I think I covered it in Alcohol Explained 2. But if not, it's on a blog post on the website anyway. But it's I call it ambition, and I'm not using the term in its narrow sense in a career perspective of trying to get that next promotion, but just generally that human beings want to improve their lot in life. You're constantly looking for the next thing. It's almost like hunger and sex and all the rest of it. It's a driving force to want to constantly improve things. And I see it as you can divide it down into two basic driving forces. One is to be very critical of what we have, and the other one is to fantasize about what we don't have. Okay, so that I think you need to get clear in your mind, is that human beings have those two driving forces within them. If we have something and possess it, we're very critical of it. If we don't possess something but we want it, we tend to really idolize it. Okay. And the most obvious example of that is relationships. You know, with someone playing hard to get, when they're accessible, they just become, you know, you want them less than when they're inaccessible. It really is that simple. But how that plays into addiction, obviously, is very different, because when we stop drinking, that's exactly what we do. We tend to take it for granted. You know, waking up not feeling miserable, we just take for granted. And very quickly, we take all the benefits of sobriety for granted. And then we start fantasizing about drinking, and forgotten are all the hangovers, the drunken arguments, and forget that even just the dullness of it all. I mean, for God's sake, taking a sedative just so that you feel half asleep and stupefied and then sitting in front of the TV, how is that enjoyable? You know, you forget all of that, and you forget the one or two drinks over your entire lifespan that you actually really enjoyed. And you start to build up this ridiculous, unrealistic fantasy of what drinking's like. So that's the term I use for it, is ambition. As I say, if you go onto the website, there is an article on there, but if not, I think it's Alcohol Explained too, where I put the chapter in. William, I know you talk very openly in your books about your own sobriety journey, but I'd love to hear more about you personally dealt with fading affect bias and any techniques you use when faced with temptation to relapse. You seem so determined and steadfast, which is often the opposite of how many of us feel. So I think it'd be really inspiring. Well, one of the big things that I used to do, because one of the parts of drinking that I used to hate the most was waking up feeling exhausted but unable to go back to sleep and feeling really anxious. And when I quit drinking, so it's 7 years ago, so my boys then were like, I don't know, 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, so really little, still waking up a lot in the night. And one of the things young parents have more than anything is exhaustion. He was just so tired all the time. And I'd wake up in the night and think, oh my God, this is my rare chance to sleep, and I can't sleep. And as soon as I tied in that insomnia was tied to alcohol, that was something that jumped into my mind every time I saw an alcoholic drink. Instead of seeing oh, how lovely it would be, I just saw myself waking up at 3, 4 in the morning, feeling really anxious and exhausted, and lying there awake, and then having to get up at like 6 or 7, even more tired than when I went to bed. And that can be helpful, because there's a lot of ways of dispelling the nonsense around alcohol. But I think you need to sometimes just pick on 1 or 2 that are really powerful for you. And that was the one that was powerful for me. And that also, when you're in a situation where you're under a lot of pressure to drink, or you're craving or whatever, it's good to have that ace up your sleeve. You've got that one, you know, like the Getty images, the stock images, you've got that stock image of how horrible drinking is, to pull up and think, you know what, I do not want that. And that was the thing, I think, probably more than anything, that kept me on the straight and narrow. It was like, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to be waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning and lying there waiting for another exhausting day to start. It's just no way to live. So, hi, William. I wonder if you might be able to fit in a quick talk on cross addiction, specifically ones that are interrelated. For example, addictions that need to be tackled both at once rather than one at a time. And I did go back and ask for a bit of clarification on this. It's potentially a very long subject, and it's not one I feel equipped to talk about, because although I see the model of addiction as I see it applicable across all drugs, I'm very, very conscious of the fact that better people than me have slipped up by trying to apply what they know to their very small area to a wider group. Typical examples being Alan Carr, who was very clever about smoking. And again, for lots of reasons, I think he was a genius and he paved the way for me, certainly. But I do genuinely think he didn't quite get it right when he was talking about alcohol. And obviously some of the big names who talk about trauma being at the root of all addiction, when yes, they've dealt with many addicts, but in the grand scheme of things, 0.00001% of the world's population of addicts, and they've only usually dealt with, for example, heroin addicts, and they try and apply their knowledge of addiction across all addictions. I don't think it works very well. So I'm loath to jump in, but what I will say is, most of these addictions do have that physiology where you take the drug and as it wears off, you feel unpleasant. Okay. And that unpleasant feeling can be the trigger, not only for that drug, but for another drug, which is why people, when they drink or smoke a lot, they tend to drink as well, because alcohol being a sedative, almost whatever your withdrawal is, an alcoholic drink will take the edge off it. So you can quit drinking, but be addicted to cigarettes or any number of other things, and that will keep the flame of desire alive within you, because every time you suffer that withdrawal, it can trigger the drug that you're addicted to, but it can also a lot of the time trigger a desire for a drink, because that withdrawal can be relieved by taking a drink. And if you're talking about things like stimulants like nicotine, as you take more and more of them, it builds up and you start to get very tense. So while you're constantly relieving the withdrawal, you're becoming more and more tense throughout the day. And by the end of the day, all you really want is a drink to take the edge off things. You spend all day taking this powerful stimulant, it leaves you really twitched up and unpleasant. So it can all kind of be tied in together, but I can't really start talking about individual addictions that are non-alcohol tobacco related, because honestly, I've not experienced them. And I've said this before, but I do genuinely think that someone trying to give advice on an addiction that they've not suffered from is like someone trying to write a travel guide for a country they've never visited. People do it with the best will in the world, and they're genuinely convinced that they've got something to add. But if you haven't suffered an addiction, it's very, very difficult to actually talk about it. I'm sure you've covered this before. I have a very dear friend with severe heart failure. He's been told that a little alcohol is good for him, and he thinks from medical staff that he may have seen it somewhere. We were discussing it the other day. He's been having a few pints in the week because he likes the social aspect of the pub, and it's the way he's always relaxed. He's noticing that the few pints is making him feel dreadful the next day. I tried to send him some info on heart disease and alcohol, advising that none is good. Found some from the British Heart Foundation, which was hazy, actually stating that 1 glass of red wine may be good for women over the age of 55. Absolutely unbelievable. I was really quite amazed that this info is still being spread by reputable agencies. I really want to help him with some good, solid information about this. It's up to him, obviously, what he does, but he will listen to medical advice, leaflets, etc. He's not up to reading a book, or I would recommend yours. Just wondering what more I can do here. Thank you. The advice is there's no amount of alcohol that's good for you. It doesn't help your heart at all. Funnily enough, I did an Instagram post recently about and it's in the books anyway, but the things that are supposedly good for your heart are not in alcohol, they're in wine. And they're not in the alcoholic part of the wine, they're in the grape part of the wine. Okay, alcohol is a poisonous carcinogen with zero health benefits. And I challenge any human being, organization, medical professional, anyone to prove me wrong on that. Okay, it's a carcinogen. It speeds your heart rate up. It's incredibly bad for your heart. Okay, just a little talk now about fitness. Okay, one of the big things about physical fitness is blood composition. Okay, so when your heart pumps, it's pumping blood around your body, and that blood carries nutrients. It also carries oxygen. Okay, so your heart's pumping, your muscles need oxygen to work. So your heart pumps, the blood goes around, and it carries oxygen to the muscles. Okay, when you start moving and exercising, your muscles are using up more oxygen, so the heart has to beat faster. If you do that regularly, your body adapts, and it adapts by your blood changing. And there's two main changes that happen in your blood. Firstly, the red blood cells are replaced more quickly, so that the age of them goes down. And why that's a benefit, the younger blood cells carry more oxygen. Okay, and the other change in your blood is that the red blood cells group together more. So I don't know, imagine instead of having 100 million per square, milliliter of blood or whatever it is, you have 200 million. So every time your heart pumps, twice as much oxygen is getting to your muscles. Okay, and then when you stop exercising, your heart rate goes down. That's why a low heart rate is considered healthy. Your heart's working less hard. Now, the converse is also true. Alcohol, nicotine, most drugs, they speed your heart rate up. Okay, so if you're sat there in front of the TV drinking, your heart rate is going up. Your muscles are getting too much oxygen, they don't need it, so your blood changes the other way. The age, the mean average age of the blood cells goes up, and they start to pull further and further apart. Okay, so then your heart's having to work harder to pump the blood and the oxygen to get to your muscles. Okay, that's not good. It's never good. And if he's got severe heart failure and he's being told to drink alcohol, that's absolutely abysmal. You might as well tell him to smoke cigarettes. It's doing exactly the same thing. It's chemically elevating his heart rate, which is not good at all. I don't know where he's got this information from, and I'm frankly appalled that he's being told this by medical professionals. As I say, even the British government now is very clear that no amount of alcohol is good for you, and the best thing you can do is not drink. So that's absolutely terrible. I think I've got a feeling that Professor David Nutt's book may go into this. What was that called? I can't remember. Alcohol. Someone will hopefully put it in the comments, but I've got a feeling he covers it. But he certainly says about how alcohol is not good for you in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, I mean, that's terrible. I had a horrible message from someone once saying that they got a congenital heart problem, and because they heard that red wine was good for them, they started drinking wine every day and then got addicted to it and couldn't stop. I mean, it's unbelievable. It really is. I've been alcohol-free since reading your book 4 years ago next week. Fantastic. I look back on my life, mid-50s, and realise that I'm extremely blessed. But as a dad of 2 teenagers, I can't help wondering how I could have avoided alcohol at their age. Everything I have ever enjoyed in my rich and varied life was centered around booze, or at least had consumption of alcohol as a key part of the celebrations and dinners associated with it. Even though I know I won't ever drink again, I do wonder if I could have enjoyed these formative pastimes, team sports, academic interests, travel, etc., as much as I did without indulging. My question is, does alcohol have any useful place in life for the next generation? This is a really good question. And what I would invite you to do is to look. I mean, I can't talk about your individual experiences. I can talk about mine. I have a similar thing. I look back over my life and I have lots and lots of experiences where I kind of, it's the integral part of it is consuming alcohol, it's drinking. But when I look back before that, before I started drinking, I've got similar experiences where alcohol wasn't involved. Okay. And I genuinely think, had I never drunk alcohol, if there was no alcohol on the planet, I don't think we'd miss out on these things. I don't think we would go through life never having, these wonderful situations. I've said this before, rough statistic, 8 billion people on the planet, approximately half of them drink, half of them don't drink. 4 billion people live their lives without alcohol. Okay. I don't believe they miss out on enjoyable situations. I don't believe they don't dance and laugh and, go to weddings and enjoy birthdays, that they don't have these really amazing experiences, that they have, rich, varied lives and all these wonderful meals and everything and celebrations and dinners, and don't enjoy them. So I can't tell you your personal experience, but I genuinely believe human beings are capable of enjoying long, happy, varied, enjoyable lives without having alcohol. Let's just consider what drug you're talking about here. It is a sedative. That's it. It's a sedative. It just dulls your feelings slightly. You have to question on a chemical sense how that can make you enjoy anything more. The answer is really, these are enjoyable situations anyway. The drink tends to be a bit of a placebo with it. And I genuinely believe and hope that alcohol doesn't have any useful place in life for the next generation. I hope that our children will not do as we did, which is forget how to live and enjoy their lives unless they've got a drink in their hands. Because ultimately that's what we did. I know people are out there who've got horrible childhoods, but most people have had time in their childhood that they remember being happy. We go to parties as children. I mean, as I say, I've got 2 young children. They go to parties. They're a bit shy when they get there, but then they go absolutely nuts. They enjoy themselves fully. Imagine going to a 10-year-old party and they're giving them alcohol because they want them to enjoy it a bit more. It's inconceivable. So why would it be any different when you hit 15, 20, 25, 30, 50? one of the big reasons, actually, I was thinking of this the other day, that we start to believe this is because a big part of socializing is feeling an affinity to someone, to other people, to feel like you've got something in common with them. Now, when you drink and you go out and everyone's drinking, so when you stop drinking and you go out and everyone's drinking, you really feel a them and us thing, because you're going out and everyone else is doing something that you're not allowed to do. So you immediately feel this barrier between you, so you don't feel that affinity. But that's not a fault. It's not because you're not drinking, it's because they are drinking. You know, as a child, that was not there. And I genuinely see alcohol starting to go the way of smoking. You know, that pedestal that we've put it on for so many years is being pulled down from that, and we're starting to see it in all its ugly reality. And I think we can learn to go out and enjoy ourselves without drinking. And in fact, if you've done 4 years, I dare say you have been out and enjoyed yourself without drinking. So you knew it as a child, you forgot it as a drinker, and you've relearnt it now you've quit. Wouldn't it be nicer though if your children could just never forget it in the first place and just live their life? And I genuinely believe that's possible. I'm in my early sobriety, day 19. I'm afraid to say it too often as I don't want to jinx anything, but I really think I'm done with drinking for good. I've had attempts before, 2 weeks, 2 months, and I appreciate the logical and straightforward way that you talk about the dangers of alcohol in Alcohol Explained. Now that I know the facts, I can't unknow them. I'd be interested in learning more about the connection between alcoholism and verbal abuse. I'm married to someone who's become increasingly angry and mean when he drinks, which is fairly often. It's never physical, but the name calling, blaming, and criticism are just becoming intolerable. I'm working on a plan to leave if he doesn't get help. But is this just who he is, or have the years of drinking taken his ability to be truly emphatic and kind? Thank you for what you do to help others stop drinking alcohol. So I do cover this in the book, and it is on emotions. So just to remind you, there's a part of the brain called the limbic system, which is at the front part of the brain, and it regulates emotions. So that's how emotions are created and regulated in the brain. I mean, emotions fired off like a firework, but then the limbic system jumps on it and calms it down if it's not required. Now, the limbic system is particularly susceptible to the sedating effects of alcohol. So when you drink alcohol, you become increasingly unable to regulate your emotions, which is why you have these stereotypical images of people crying their eyes out when they've been drinking, or, you know, getting all overly emotional and trying to contact exes or whatever it is. Drinkers become as emotionally unstable as a toddler, basically. It's not very attractive, but it's to do with the alcohol. Now, tie that in as well. Don't forget what I was talking about before. Now, the more years you're drinking, the more your brain has to adjust and to become oversensitive to counter the sedating effects of the alcohol, and the more unpleasant and uptight you'll feel when the alcohol wears off. So when someone's been drinking for a few years, they're in this horrible situation where the alcohol's starting to wear off and they feel tense and unpleasant. But as this is going in, they're becoming increasingly unable to regulate their emotions. So this could be it might not be, it might be an obnoxious person to begin with, but he or she might be actually quite a pleasant person. But when you throw in a case of the jitters and that uptight, unpleasant feeling, and then completely anesthetize their ability to regulate their emotion, what you normally find is they become really overly emotional, and it's usually a bad emotion. Because that anxiety and unpleasant feeling kicks in, it's more likely to be anger and bitterness and resentment that kicks in. And of course, we know that alcohol it removes our inhibition, so we're more likely to stay stuffed. But I think for me, that's certainly a minor point of it. The fact of the matter is, the alcohol is changing who we are as a person. We become on a hair trigger, and the slightest thing, when it sets us off, we're unable to regulate. So I don't know who this person is. And as I say, he may be a really nice person, or he may be obnoxious anyway. But it is absolutely to do with the alcohol. He might be an unpleasant person, but the alcohol will still be exacerbating that. The only way you can really find out is for him to stop completely, and to see what's there when that's happened. Now, if he's not prepared to do that, that's obviously your decision. And I see there that you're talking about potentially making a break for things anyway. But yeah, no, absolutely, it is the alcohol that's doing it. I was just wondering, is the use of alcohol where cooking affecting us, or is it burnt off? One of the TV cooks who is also veggie said grape juice is good, thanks. So it does get cooked off if the temperature's high enough. Don't forget, so we can brew. So just quick lesson in how to make alcoholic drinks. So alcohol yeast is a bacteria. It consumes sugar and it excretes two things. It excretes carbon dioxide and alcohol. Okay. So if you get some rotting fruit and vegetables or some rotting grape juice and throw a load of yeast in, the yeast eats the sugar and it excretes carbon dioxide and alcohol. No living thing can live in its own waste product when that amount goes up and up and up. So usually what you find is you can get a percentage up to a certain amount, about 5% for beer, sort of 12, 13, 14% for wine. But then the alcohol itself kills the yeast. So that's the strongest alcoholic drink you can get. So then what you have to do to make spirits, you heat up that liquid. Now, alcohol has I need to get this right. I'll probably get it the wrong way around. I think it has a lower boiling point than water. So when you boil, for example, beer, the first vapor that will come off it is almost neat alcohol. And that's what stills do. That's how you make spirits. So you suck off that alcohol and you end up with purer version of alcohol. So if you're cooking using wine and you're boiling it for, 20 minutes, almost all the alcohol is going to be burnt off anyway. But of course, not all of it's going to be burnt off. Some of it may be left. Don't forget, grape juice should be good because that's what wine is. It's just rotten grape juice. So that's fine. I mean, personally, I'm not too fussy about it, but each to their own. But yeah, I mean, grape juice should work fairly well for it. This is an interesting one. I've noticed recently that the smell of alcohol now makes me feel nauseous. Does anyone else experience that? I'm just over 8 months alcohol free with no intention of returning to it ever. When I started, I was initially trying to take a break from it, but the more I've read and listened to, my decision to quit forever is cemented. My question is there a physical or psychological explanation for this? So yes, there is. What I would like you to think about is cigarette smoking and vaping. This is quite interesting. Most people, when they first smoke a cigarette, cough. Okay. And that's true as well for vaping. Most of the time, when people first take a lungful of vape, it makes them cough. Right. This is the body's natural reaction to breathing in something that is not oxygen and air. We're not designed to do it. And your lungs react to it. And they react to it by trying to eject it as quickly as possible, which is coughing. Okay. But when you breathe in either cigarette smoke or vape, there's a drug in it, nicotine, and that drug makes you feel slightly different. And when the nicotine wears off, it makes you feel unpleasant. And then you have another dose of it and it makes you feel good again. So after a few puffs of these things, your brain actually changes your natural reaction from coughing to not coughing. Because human beings, all living things, are great adapters. And what's happened there is your body has adapted because how it's come to it is breathing in smoke is really vile. It's bad for me. I'm going to cough it out. Oh, hang on. No, it isn't. This makes me feel a lot better. I like this. So it stops you coughing. The same is true of taste and smell. Okay. When you're drinking something over and over again, you're associating it with that good feeling you get. So you start to reinterpret that smell and start to see it as something pleasurable and you want it. But when you quit, that goes away. So you're smelling alcohol for exactly how it is. And it is foul. It's a foul smelling poison. Generally speaking, living things are pre-programmed to be able to differentiate between food and poison by taste and smell. Poisonous things taste and smell vile. It's not true for everything, but for most of the time it is. We know as human beings what we can eat because our parents give us things to eat. They don't give us poison. But animals don't have that. All they know is that they taste something, and if it tastes good, they eat it. If it doesn't taste good, they spit it out. And that's how it works. So humans are pre-programmed to find alcohol absolutely vile, but as we keep taking it, partly we get used to it anyway, but partly because as we start to associate it with that good feeling, supposedly, we start to reinterpret the smell of it. But when you quit, it goes back to normal. So that's how alcohol is supposed to react. How we're supposed to react to it. Let me see how many. Oh no, I'm nearly there. A bit worried about time. Whenever I see alcohol advertisements on TV, they make me uncomfortable and angry. Normally, I don't see them because I stream my entertainment. But now that I'm watching the Olympics, there are so many manipulating alcohol adverts with high definition images of booze. I know I can't change this, but the injustice of the mass brainwashing really gets to me. I'm almost 11 months alcohol free now. Any tips? Yeah, don't worry about it. You can't change the world. I mean, I see them. I just don't even worry about them, to be honest. It's legal, query whether it should be, but the fact of the matter it is. So don't get riled up over it. It's there. How I approach the world is there's a billion things out there you'd want to change if you could. I mean, that horrible statistic about something like 6,000 children starving to death every day in Africa is absolutely abysmal. You know, you haven't got to look very far. There's all these human beings being murdered. There's wars going on. There's animals being mistreated. There's so much out there that you want to do something about. But you can't change everything. So what I do is just pick something you can do and do your little bit, because if all 8 billion people in the world do that, obviously the world would be a bit of a better place. So try not to worry about everything, particularly the things you can't worry about, and just try and take the few baby steps you can, that you can do something about. This is a great question. I love this one. Do you think it's true that you can never completely replace that 20-minute buzz the first drink gives you, and that therefore not drinking is a compromise, a kind of cost-benefit analysis in which you sacrifice an albeit temporary high for knowing you won't suffer the corresponding downs, hangover, etc.? If it was a graph, the sober person would be flatlining, whereas someone who drinks have highs and lows. So it's a really good question. I don't believe that at all. Okay. Because you're talking about a buzz and a high. Alcohol is a sedative. It can't give you a high. All it can do is slightly sedate you. Okay. There's two reasons why we associate it with feeling good. One, because when we're regularly drinking, going back to the physiology side of it, you know, we take a drink, our brain becomes hypersensitive. When the drink wears off, we feel anxious and uptight, and then we have another drink and it makes us feel more relaxed. That's one of the reasons we associate alcohol with feeling good, because when we're drinking regularly, we're basically anesthetizing the withdrawal caused by the last dose. Okay, that's not true for everyone. In fact, I was never a regular drinker. It wasn't true for me. What was true for me is I would go out and I wouldn't be particularly happy until I had a drink in my hand. Now, that was nothing to do with the chemical alcohol. That was to do with the craving process. Okay, that was me thinking I can't enjoy myself without a drink. And of course, I wasn't enjoying myself without that drink, because I was thinking about, when's the drink coming? Why can't I drink? Should I have a drink? Shouldn't I have a drink? So of course I wasn't enjoying myself, whether I was watching a film or having a meal or with friends or whatever it was, because I was too busy obsessing about having a drink. So when you have a drink, you remove that distressing mental conundrum and you can actually relax and enjoy yourself. So what you're talking about, that 20-minute bars, I don't know. I don't see that at all. And if anyone wants to test this, if you're still drinking, a really good way of doing it is to, in fact, the best possible way you can do it is to have a break from alcohol for a week or two, because then you get rid of all the withdrawal, all that unpleasant feeling. Okay, you have an alcoholic drink in a completely neutral situation. So not one where you're feeling nervous, not one where you're out with friends, with nothing. Annie Grace did it. I think she just sat in her kitchen on her own and had a drink to see how it would make her feel. And it's a massively interesting experience, because we're so convinced that alcohol makes us feel good, but it doesn't. If you have no withdrawal, you've slept well, you've got no anxiety, nothing that's worrying you that you can anesthetize that will make you feel slightly better, you're not out with friends or having a meal or relaxing at the end of the day anyway, so you're not enjoying yourself anyway, you're just completely 100% neutral, and you have an alcoholic drink, there is no way you would describe it as a buzz or a high. You feel slightly strange, you find it hard to concentrate, you find it tunnel visioned, a bit confused, but it's not enjoyable. That's the amazing thing with it. When you have a blackout, is that the person has forgotten the moment the day after, or was the person unaware of what they were doing at the exact time? No. So a blackout, and again, I think this is in, I think, Alcohol Explained. This is all theoretical, okay? We as humans don't really understand how memory works, but the generally accepted theory at the moment is you have a short-term memory and a long-term memory. Okay, so for example, I'm talking about blackouts now. That is in my short-term memory as I'm having this conversation. Okay, but in a month's time, I probably won't remember what I was talking about on this live. Okay, there will be parts of today or important things going on in my life, however, that I will remember for the rest of my life. So the idea is you have a short-term memory that lasts, I can't remember, 20 minutes or half an hour or something. And most things you remember it and then they're just forgotten. But the more important things then pass from short-term memory into long-term memory. Now, the idea is, or the prevailing theory at the moment is that alcohol stops memories passing from short into long-term. So you have short-term memory, but no long-term. The interesting thing is it's not about drinking loads. It's just about drinking a steady amount over a long period of time. So that's really what I'm talking about blackouts. It's not when people just get hammered and can't remember the next day. It's when people forget entire days. And it's particularly disconcerting because for people that are around them, they might not appear drunk because they may have had a few drinks, just enough to keep that level going so that their memories aren't going into long-term memory, but not enough for them to appear really intoxicated. And you quite often get it with people who are hiding their drinking, secret drinkers, because they're sneaking drinks left, right and centre. People who are with them don't really realise they're drinking, but it's enough for them to not remember. So they will remember it and be functioning at the time, but they won't remember it the next day is the short answer to that. This one, how long have I? Yeah, I think I've just got about time to deal with this. This was one that was posted a few weeks ago and I just didn't get around to dealing with it. With summer in full swing, I'm seeing people out enjoying having some drinks in the park and at barbecues, etc. The drinking I'm seeing is quite casual, as they are usually family-friendly events, etc. So not the party binge drinking types of exposures. I have no interest in drinking and I'm not craving drinking. I'm proud of my departure from that dysfunctional relationship I had with alcohol, and I'm appreciating every clear and fresh day alcohol-free. It has been probably 8 months now. My struggle is this: I've been feeling some jealousy and feeling a bit down on myself for having drunk so much as a young adult and abusing alcohol so much that I now can't have that take it or leave it relationship with it. For example, my wife used to drink heavily in her teens and at college, but then quit in her mid-20s and now 40s. She absolutely can and does just have a drink on occasion. It takes her about an hour to drink it and she never reaches for a second. She will do this once every couple of months, perhaps. I know she's a rarity and I could certainly never do that again, but I'm a bit sad that I ruined it for myself. I know it is a poison and all the negatives, but if you only have one every few months, then those effects are null again. I know I'm beyond that, but I sometimes feel angry that I abused alcohol so much as a youth that I now had to actively quit and constantly manage having quit. It's a strange feeling. I'm happy I quit, but I'm sad I put myself in the position that I had to quit. Right. The key here is we only really enjoy alcohol when we're addicted to it. And that is true of any drug. Okay. I deal with this in Alcohol Explained too. Every drug has a take it or leave it phase. Smoking, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, there is a period where you can take it or leave it before you become fully psychologically and chemically addicted to it. I won't go into the reasons, but alcohol is one of the ones that take the longest to become addicted to, purely because we drink it rather than injecting it or snorting it or smoking it. So it takes that much longer for our subconscious to link cause to effect. Okay. So where you're getting confused here, you're thinking when you are addicted to a drug, any drug, taking that drug is intensely pleasurable. Okay, because you're relieving the withdrawal and all the mental anxiety and all the craving that comes about wanting it. So it feels intensely pleasurable to take it. Now, in fact, it's a purely negative thing because all you're really doing is relieving an unpleasant physical sensation that came from the previous dose and the mental craving that came from wanting to relieve that. So although it's intensely pleasurable when you have it, all you're doing is relieving some very unpleasant feelings and feeling normal again. And that's how non-addicts feel all the time. So it's a complete con anyway. But I mean, just listen to this. She has an alcoholic drink and it takes her an hour to drink it and she never reaches for a second. Do you think she's enjoying it? If you're enjoying something, it doesn't take you an hour to drink it and you don't not reach for a second. Okay. I drink alcoholic beers quicker than that. I drink a glass of water quicker than, if I'm thirsty and I'm enjoying a drink of water, it doesn't take me an hour to drink it. Okay. When we start drinking or smoking or injecting heroin or whatever, it's not really that enjoyable because we're not addicted to it. So we can take it or leave it. It's only when it becomes crucial that we really, really need it and we really, really want it. And that's what you're doing. You're saying here, it's almost like I really enjoyed it and I've spoilt it for myself. But the fact of the matter is, you didn't enjoy it until you spoilt it for yourself, because it's only when you become addicted to it that it really becomes crucial and necessary. Okay. And that's the key there. I think I've probably ranted on long enough. It's been 50 minutes. I hope that was useful for everyone. Yeah, it's been strange being back. It seems like a long time since I did a live. I think I've got a guest next week. So I'm going to think for the next month or two anyway, I'll be going back into the 1 week, just me, 1 week a guest. I hope everyone's well. And I shall look forward to seeing everyone next week. Bye.